Hey, let's say you have yourself a nice paintball mask where replacing a lens is no less than $30. This is a how-to video, more for you do-it-yourselfers out there, and we're going to show you how to protect your lens in a practical way. Here we have both an Empire axe and invert mini, or mini invert mini axe, and the culprit to scratching lenses in many cases is the back of your gun poppet. Put this up against the lens and you've scratched it. How does that generally happen? Well, you're in game and you're holding that gun and you pull it real close to your face and you don't realize it, but you're touching it on the lens and you're scratching the lens. Here's an easy fix. Okay, to pull this project off, you're going to need a couple different fabrics. You're going to need elastic, which you can get at any fabric store. This is 1 inch wide. I suggest you go in that length. If not, maybe perhaps a little narrow. You can do that as well. It also comes in red and green and other colors at your fabric stores now. So if you want to match up your gun, you can. The other fabric you're going to need is going to be some soft fabric, something like this. You can buy it by the inch or the foot, but it sells by the yard at fabric stores. You could also do it in camo if you'd like. The finished product looks like this. In assembly, you'll have your socket cover that goes over the back end of the gun and the elastic sewn. If you recognize the markers, we do have an invert mini over here, an invert axe over here, and they do both have the quick release ASA regs. I bought this as aftermarket. Many parts on the invert can be upgraded to take parts of the axe. Alright guys, for the sake of this exercise I have 2 pieces of the same fabric to show you how it's going to work. You're going to have your 5-inch length of elastic. You're going to bring it together to create the seam. The presser foot here on the sewing machine has a center seam marker down the middle. You match that over the center seam of what you're going to be sewing over. See that little slice? That allows you to visually see the seam that's below, and you want to match this here up with the seam of your fabric as it comes together. You're going to set your stitch width to 5 so the stitch jumps back and forth across that seam. You're going to set your length to 3 so it moves forward as well. You're going to set your thread to a zigzag so they can jump back and forth. So when we brought this together, we were careful not to buckle the fabric in a way that it's underneath and I don't sew across the same fabric. Working with black, it's really hard, guys. So you'll see, I'm very careful not to let that happen. With a 5-inch length, we've only got 2.5 inches on each side to play with. It's a very hard sewing task here. So let's get started. As we begin, I'm going to use the foot pedal and the hand crank at the same time so that I can get a nice, slow, and careful stitch where I want it. It's a fun thing to let a sewing machine just rip away and sew quickly, but in a situation like this you just can't afford to do that. You have to go slow. I think I've got it. Your template's going to be 2.5 inches by 5 inches in length. So there's your 5 inches in length. And here's your 2.5 inch wide. Okay? Now, just because you have it at that length doesn't mean that's where it's going to stay. Because what's going to happen is you're going to fold it over, and unless you guys are like dead on perfect, you're going to have some imperfections here. And you're going to want to trim it. So here I am trimming it down to get it exact. So you're going to want a nice clean edge on all sides. Got to get this side now. So when you run this through the sewing machine, you're not dealing with it twice. After both sides are sewn, you have this. You're going to turn it inside out. Around our edges, we turn our sock inside out. We find the edge, come around it on a circled half circle. And we cut off the excess. Now we have a rounded sock. We're going to turn it inside out now. Looks that much better. This part of the project, you can use a heavy-duty thread now to sew through the sock. Don't run this through the sewing machine. Don't run this through your sewing machine. It will not work unless you've got a very expensive heavy-duty sewing machine. It'll create bird's nests in the sewing machine. When you're sewing, you want a manageable length of thread, so don't make something that's any longer than this to spot stitch. I've taken and I've set this over the sock. I've lined the seam up, and this is where I'm going to start, by the way. So I'm going to come up through the inside on the seam to hide my thread. And just go back and forth. I'm going to spot stitch right back and forth through that section. You don't have to put a lot of these in. It's why it's called a spot stitch. You're going to do a couple here, and then move on to another point around the edge. I mean, you could theoretically sew all the way around, but all you really need to do is just put a spot here, put a spot here, put a spot here, put a spot here, and just go around so it anchors it. The more anchor points, the less opportunity you have actually to tear or rip. When you tie off from the inside, tie one knot and a second knot so that you're ready to sew again. And you're able to continue on with the same thread. You don't have to rethread the needle. So now I'm just going to move on to my next spot.